Have you ever been with someone who seems hard to read? One moment they're close, the next they pull away. It feels like they've disappeared into their own world, and you're left wondering, do they even care about me at all? Here's the truth: people who lean avoidant often look distant on the outside, but that doesn't mean you're not on their mind. In fact, sometimes their distance is proof that you are in their head more than you realize. When someone has an avoidant attachment style, their rhythm of connection can feel like an emotional game of hide and seek. One day you feel them leaning in, sending messages, showing affection, being present in your life, and then, just as quickly, they vanish into silence. To the person on the receiving end, this disappearance often feels personal. It feels like rejection, like you did something wrong, or like their interest was never real in the first place. But what's often happening under the surface is very different. The pulling away is not necessarily about a lack of care. It's about the way avoidants manage their own overwhelming feelings. When they start to feel too close, too vulnerable, or too dependent on someone, their instinct is to retreat. Distance becomes their way of regaining a sense of control. Here's the part that's easy to miss: when they do come back, and they almost always do, it's not random. If you weren't on their mind, there would be no reason to reach out again. Their return is evidence that despite their defenses, the connection they feel with you is stronger than their need to escape it. They may not be texting you every day or showering you with verbal reassurance, but the act of circling back after space is its own form of communication. It says, I tried to live without your presence in my life, and I couldn't. Think of it like this: if you eat a certain food every single day, you stop noticing the flavor. But when you step away from it for a while, you realize how much you miss it. Avoidants create that space, sometimes unconsciously, only to realize that the absence of the person they're distancing from creates a hole they can't ignore. So when you suddenly see their name pop up on your phone again, it's not just about convenience. It's a sign that you're living rent-free in their head. The challenge is that their return can be inconsistent, which makes it tempting to doubt the meaning behind it. You might ask yourself, if I really mattered, wouldn't they just stay? But avoidants aren't wired that way. Their version of closeness is often measured in moments of reconnection after space. Every time they reach out after pulling away, it's a battle they've had internally. Part of them wanted to stay away to protect their independence, and another part couldn't resist the pull of you. The fact that the second part wins is proof of your impact. It's also important to notice how they reappear. Sometimes it's with a simple message like, "Hey, how's your week been?" Other times it's through something casual, like sending you a funny meme or asking about a detail from your last conversation. The method may seem low effort, but the meaning underneath is significant. They've been thinking about you enough to break their own silence. They chose to reconnect, and that choice doesn't come easily to someone whose default setting is self-protection. Their return is not just a message in your inbox, it's a message about your place in their mind. One of the most telling signs that you're in an avoidant person's head is when they remember small details you thought went unnoticed. Avoidants are often painted as detached, uninterested, or emotionally cold, but that's rarely the full picture. The truth is, many of them are highly observant. They may not express affection in obvious ways, but they store information quietly, almost like collecting evidence of what matters to you. When they recall these little things, it's not an accident, it's a subtle window into how deeply you've registered in their world. Think about it. You might casually mention your favorite snack, or the fact that you've got a big meeting on Wednesday, or even a story from your childhood that you only told once. Later, when they bring it up, it catches you off guard. You didn't think they were paying attention because maybe in the moment they didn't react much. But avoidants process internally. They're not always quick to jump in with validation or excitement, but that doesn't mean they didn't take it in. In fact, the very act of remembering and repeating it later shows that it's stuck with them. And things only stick when they've made an emotional imprint. This is particularly powerful because avoidants aren't usually detail-oriented about everyone. They tend to keep emotional distance with most people in their lives, so the fact that your words echo in their memory highlights that you've carved out a unique space. When they remember the exact way you like your coffee or the story about your favorite teacher in school, it's because they've attached meaning to you. They might not articulate it, with grand gestures, but their memory becomes their way of showing, I was listening and what you said mattered enough to hold on to. It's worth noting that when avoidants recall these details, it often shows up at unexpected moments. You could be in a conversation about something completely unrelated, and suddenly they'll reference that offhand comment you made 2 weeks ago. Or you'll be out somewhere and they'll suggest a restaurant that just happens to serve the dessert you once mentioned craving. On the surface, it might look casual, but beneath that casualness is intentionality. They're weaving you into their world, even if they struggle to openly say how much they value you. For someone who is avoidant, remembering details also gives them a sense of safety. Feelings can overwhelm them, but facts feel manageable. So instead of blurting out, I really like you, they'll show it in practical ways by knowing your schedule, noticing your habits, or keeping track of your preferences. It's their version of closeness, coded in memory rather than in overt expression. And here's the key, they wouldn't bother holding on to those pieces of information if you weren't significant to them. An avoidant isn't going to spend time remembering every passing comment from people they don't care about. The fact that your words linger in their mind is a quiet signal. You've broken through the emotional distance, and now you occupy a place that no amount of detachment can erase. One of the most revealing moments with an avoidant partner is when their emotions slip out in unguarded ways. Avoidants are often skilled at keeping a cool, collected exterior. They like to give off the impression that they're in control, unaffected, and independent. But no matter how much they try to manage their image, human emotions are hard to cage forever. At times, their feelings leak through in small expressions, tone of voice, body language, a quick reaction that expose just how invested they really are. These moments are powerful because they often say more than the words they're willing to speak. You might notice it in something as subtle as the way they look at you when they think you're not watching. That lingering glance, the softness in their eyes, or even the frustration when they feel you've pulled away. These are moments that betray their true attachment. They may try to act unaffected when you don't text back right away, but if they suddenly seem shorter in their responses or oddly irritated, that's not indifference. That's an emotional slip, revealing that they care far more than they intended to show. Sometimes it appears in humor. An avoidant might joke about you seeing other people or throw out a sarcastic comment when they feel insecure. On the surface, it seems like banter, but underneath, it's an indirect way of expressing feelings they don't know how to articulate. They may not say, I'm scared of losing you, but a misplaced joke or a playful dig can carry the weight of that fear. These small cracks in their armor let you see what's really going on inside. A storm of emotions they struggle to regulate. It can also happen in moments of vulnerability they didn't plan to share. Maybe they open up about their day in more detail than usual or admit something that stresses them out. It might be brief, and they might try to change the subject quickly. But the fact that they let that slip means they trust you enough to reveal a side of themselves they usually guard. Even anger or irritation can be a clue. When they're indifferent, they're calm and detached. But when they feel emotionally triggered by your actions, it's a sign you hold a place in their heart strong enough to affect their state. These unguarded emotions are important because they represent authenticity. Avoidants often live with a protective wall, but the moments when that wall cracks show where their real feelings live. You'll notice it most in times when they don't have the energy to keep up the facade, or when something hits too close to home. They may retreat afterwards, embarrassed at their own vulnerability. But the fact that it happened at all is evidence that you matter deeply to them. Their emotions may not always be spoken in words, but they're written in the unplanned slips, the glance, the tone, the joke, the frustration that give them away every single time. When someone has an avoidant style, one of the most telling signs that you're in their head is how their energy shifts around you compared to others. Avoidants tend to keep a consistent front with most people calm, self-sufficient, maybe even a little detached. They like to project the idea that they don't need much from anyone, and so they appear steady, almost emotionally flat in social situations. But when you walk into the room, or when they're interacting specifically with you, something changes. It may not always be obvious to the untrained eye, but if you pay attention, you'll notice their guard either softens or becomes heightened. Either way, it's different. That shift is the giveaway. It might look like nervous energy. Maybe they stumble over their words, fidget a little, or seem more self-conscious than usual. Around others, they appear composed, but with you, they're suddenly more careful about what they say or do. That nervousness is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of investment. They're aware that your opinion matters more than the average person's, and so their body betrays the fact that you have an effect on them. Even if they try to cover it up with humor or aloofness, their behavior around you won't match how they are with everyone else. Sometimes it comes through as playfulness. They may tease you more than they do others, or look for excuses to spark interaction. Avoidants often have a hard time saying, "I like you," directly, so they'll express it through energy. They may act more animated, crack more jokes, or even challenge you in ways they don't challenge other people. That shift in energy is their way of creating a bond while still protecting themselves with a layer of distance. The fact that you get a version of them others don't get is proof you're on their mind. Other times, it can be the opposite. They grow quieter or more reserved around you, but not in a way that suggests disinterest. Instead, it feels like a heightened awareness, as though they're measuring their words carefully. That stillness can actually signal how much you matter because the stakes feel higher. When they know they're invested, they become cautious not to reveal too much too quickly. The silence, the watchful eye contact, or the hesitation in their responses are all indications that you bring up emotions they're not used to navigating. What's fascinating is that avoidants may not even notice this shift themselves. They believe they're being consistent, but others around them can often pick up on the difference. Friends might joke that they act different around you, or you might notice that their mood subtly changes whenever you enter a space. That difference is the unspoken sign of significance. It's their subconscious letting slip what they try so hard to keep under wraps. Pay attention not just to their words, but to the way their presence shifts when you're near. The changes, whether it's nervous laughter, sudden seriousness, or an unusual spark of playfulness, are not random. They are the body's way of confessing what the mind is too guarded to admit. You hold a place in their heart that changes the way they show up in the world. One of the clearest signs you're in an avoidant's head is the way they test the connection subtly. Unlike someone who feels comfortable asking directly for reassurance, avoidants often struggle with that level of vulnerability. To them, openly saying, "I need to know you care about me," feels far too risky. It threatens their sense of independence and exposes them to possible rejection, which is their greatest fear. So instead of asking outright, they create little scenarios or drop hints to gauge where they stand with you. These tests may seem minor on the surface, but they reveal a lot about how invested they are. It might show up as silence. An avoidant might suddenly go quiet, not because they've lost interest, but because they're waiting to see if you'll notice. Will you check in? Will you bridge the gap? This pause becomes their way of measuring how much they matter to you without having to expose their need directly. When you do reach out, it reassures them without them ever having to say, "I was worried you'd forgotten me." Sometimes the test looks like a joke with a hidden question inside. They might tease you about talking to other people or throw out a comment that seems playful but is really a way of fishing for information. If you laugh it off or respond in a reassuring way, they relax. If you brush it aside, it may trigger their fears, even though they won't admit it out loud. These kinds of tests aren't meant to manipulate. They're protective strategies, ways of protecting their heart while still trying to get the closeness they crave. You'll also notice it when they ask questions that don't seem connected to the moment. They might ask, "So, what did you do last weekend?" Or, "Who were you out with the other night?" But the tone isn't casual curiosity, it carries weight. They're checking whether you're still as engaged with them as they are with you. Because avoidants often struggle to voice their deeper emotions, these small probes are the closest they come to saying, "Do I still matter?" At times, the test may appear as a push-pull dynamic. They might withdraw briefly to see if you'll follow, or they might challenge you in conversation to gauge how much patience you'll show. On the outside, it can look like hot and cold behavior, but underneath, it's their way of testing the resilience of the bond. They want to know if you'll stick around even when they create distance, because that's where their deepest fears live. Fear of abandonment, fear of being too much, fear of being let down. When you recognize these patterns, the meaning becomes clear. They wouldn't bother testing if you didn't matter. If you were just a casual connection, there would be no need to measure your response or check the strength of the tie. The very fact that they put you in those unspoken tests is a sign you're in their head far more than they'd ever admit directly. So if you've been wondering whether you're in the mind of that avoidant person who seems distant, the answer may not be in their words, but in their patterns. Notice the way they pull away and yet always return. Notice the small details they remember, the emotions that slip through when they think they're composed, the way their energy shifts in your presence, and the little tests they throw out to see how safe the connection feels. These are not random behaviors, they're signals. Signals that, even if they struggle to express it, you're living in their thoughts and affecting their emotions in ways they can't completely hide. At the end of the day, avoidance may not always communicate love or care in the language you expect. But if you pay attention to the quiet signs, you'll see it. You're not just someone passing through their life. You've left a mark they can't ignore. Thank you for giving me your time and attention today. I hope this message gives you clarity, not just about avoidance, but about the many ways people show love when words feel too hard to say. Remember, connection isn't always loud and care isn't always obvious. Sometimes the quietest signs are the ones that speak the loudest. Take these insights with you, notice the signals, and most importantly, honor your own needs in every relationship. Wishing you strength, clarity, and love that feels safe and true. Thank you, and until next time, take care.